Hey guys, Future Sean, just checking in quickly. Today's video is going to be all about trying out my brand new 3D printed sock knitting machine for the first time. And I had hoped that by this point I'd have a video up on my channel covering all the details from the print, like how long it took, what the materials were, and what they cost. Unfortunately, time has gotten away from me, so that video is not quite ready yet, but I wanted to release this to you anyway. I hope you enjoy it regardless, and please keep your eyes peeled for that full deep dive coming soon. The day has finally come to try out my 3D printed sock knitting machine for the first time. I've watched a couple of YouTube videos on what to do, and I can already sense some hurdles. First hurdle, this machine of course has a hole in the middle of it for your sock to go through, and that means you need a table with a hole in it. I don't have one of those. I'm gonna figure something out for that. But for now, I've attached this clamp to the back of the machine and kind of shimmied it right up to the very edge of my desk. And that way the hole is clear and it's pretty secure. It could benefit from probably another one. I've got one if I need it, but we'll see how we go with this for now. The goal today is to cast on and knit a little bit of a waist tube, and the ultimate goal will be to knit a sock tube out of this Halloween yarn. So my latest cast on project is this Halloween sock project. I've already done the cuff, but I want to see if I can do the body of the sock on the machine and then do an afterthought heel, or like a peasant heel where you cut into the tube and you sew on a short row heel later. That's the stretch goal. We'll see if we get there. But hurdle number 2 is that apparently you need some sort of special tool to help you cast on these machines. I was lured into a false sense of security by my big plastic knitting machine, where you pretty much just weave the yarn in and out of the needles and then you start cranking and it's cast on. That doesn't work here. I did try it last night. I was thinking maybe everyone is wrong and I can figure it out. It's to do with the way the needles are set up. The needles sink into the machine and it actually pulls the knitting kind of down with it. And you need a counterweight on the inside to encourage the knitting to come back out and then create a tube. Without that, it kind of just gets tangled up on the outside of the machine and it doesn't really knit. Most people use what's called a bonnet. So it's like the toe of a sock, and then it has some special split rings or loops along the top, and you basically load it into the machine, and then you can use waste yarn and just start cranking onto it. I don't have one of those. So that's hurdle number 2. We're going to have to do an emergency cast on, which I've had a little look at, and it's basically weaving some waste yarn to create kind of like a net on the inside of the machine so that you can apply some weight and get going. And once you've got that going, you can use that tube and turn that into a knitting, a cast on bonnet, I think. For now, we'll just see if we can get it moving at all, because I don't even know if this machine fully functions yet. This is the first time I've tried using it. One other quick note about the machine is that this part here, this gray kind of piece on top, is not functional. This is part of the ribber, which I'm still in the process of assembling. So just ignore this kind of gray thing with the 2 poles at the top. All the blue parts and these black parts here are part of the kind of base machine, and they can knit a stockinette tube. The ribber, once it's done, will enable me to knit 1 by 1 rib on this, which is really exciting. So for now, just ignore that. It's kind of in the way, but whatever. Without further ado, let's get started. Let's try to knit something. So I have started by threading my yarn through this yarn stand at the top, and now I'm going to pull it down and I guess load it into the yarn carrier. So that's this piece here. When you crank, it turns around. And for some reason, the design of this printable that I use, which I will link down below, it doesn't have like a split in the yarn carrier. You can't just pull the yarn in and out. You kind of have to thread it once and then it's stuck. So I wonder if that's something that could be upgraded in the design maybe. I've seen other sock machines where you can, add and remove the yarn midway through the project, which seems like an obvious feature to me. Okay, right, so the instructions for the emergency cast on that I got were to pull through several meters of yarn. So that's what I'm going to do. And then basically this rubber is going to make it a little bit difficult, but the idea is we want to add a loop to every other needle. And to do so, we're going to start on one side. We're going to stretch the yarn over to the other side of the machine and around a needle, and then back over and do the needle, 2 needles over from where we were before. Go back over the other side, 2 needles over, and you kind of go back and forth and creating like a spider web shape. So let's see if I can do that. This rhubarb is making this so much harder. I wish I didn't already have it installed, but... Okay, now I've reached the point on the back of the machine here. You can't see, but these needles have dipped down into the machine because they have just been kind of threaded. So I'm going to have to turn the handle to get this to spin around. So I'm a little nervous, but let's see what happens. Alright, I've misjudged this somehow and I've ended up with 1 needle on this side and none on the other side, so I'm just going to do something clever and I guess feed this tail through like that and then back up. Okay, I have my emergency cast on net, so I think what happens next is I'll tie off this loose end and then I need to apply some weight in the center. So I've got a couple of things I want to try out and we'll see how they go. My weight of choice is a bag of magnetic door hinges attached to a hook from my kitchen, and then I'm going to thread it onto the bottom of this bulldog clip and try to clip this underneath the net to apply some weight. So, or maybe I'll just hook this directly on actually because that is slipping. So I think the next step is just to get this working yarn latched around a hook and start cranking and see if we can't get it to stick. Doesn't look right. Let me show you what this looks like. So all these loops are just hanging off the machine. Luckily my net is still on, so let's see if I can pull this off and try again. Like right here it looks okay, but they're not actually staying. Okay, a little bit of research is telling me that maybe these emergency cast on loops are supposed to be below these latches. So I'm going to try moving a couple of them down and seeing if that fixes things. Let's start here. I guess just like pull the loop over the latch. Yeah, there we go. Let's do that for maybe like 10 of them and then crank it and see what happens. Okay, they're all done. Let's see if we can get this to work now. That is looking a lot more promising. Half of them dropped, but you can see here, these ones caught and some of these ones over here. So I'm just rescuing the little emergency tendrils, hooking them back on, and then I'm going to try to manually knit them, I guess, or just try again next round. But yes, the trick of putting the loops beneath the latches was key. It seems like sometime I didn't reset the needles to the correct height, so some of them caught and some of them didn't. But I think from here, I can work with this. I can work with this and I can make it happen. So I'm very excited. Alright, so a bit of troubleshooting later, and we've figured out that seemingly the machine works better the other way, so anti-clockwise, which thinking about it makes sense from a knitting perspective because that's the way that you knit. Either way, I'm going to start again with everything that I've learned and see if I can't get this to work now that the needles are raising up properly. Also, we removed the ribber, so it's a little bit easier to deal with now. We have some successful stitches. Not only was the anti-clockwise cranking really helpful because it raises up these needles, but I also took the weight off this. Turns out I was applying too much pressure to the inside of the needles and they were actually flipping out at the bottom and getting stuck against the cam. So I've still got to fix a few drop stitches and get all the way around, but I think we're in business. We're making great progress. I've managed to knit maybe like an inch, but there's a few stitches which are being really problematic and they keep dropping. So I'm trying out a different weight, trying out a snow globe and seeing if that applies the weight a bit more evenly because it's a really delicate balance between overweighting the machine and pushing on these needles and they get stuck versus underweighting it. And then the stitches don't slip below the latches, which is really important for actually knitting the stitch. Otherwise you end up like here with this kind of just like loose yarn that isn't knit. So I'm going to keep cranking and see if I can figure out the right balance. Something that really helped was I moved this yarn carrier in really, really close to the needles. Before, the yarn was actually missing some needles because it was a little bit further away. So it's important to have it as close as possible. Okay, since that was such a pain, I am going to turn this little successful basket into a cast on bonnet. So I think what that basically means is halving the number of stitches by doing some decreases and then kind of leaving those loops, and then you cast off like that. And so you end up with, this is a 64 stitch cylinder, so you end up with a 32 stitch looped bonnet. And then when you want to cast on next time, you can just put it inside the machine, put some weight on it, and then loop up every other needle. And then you can wind on some waste yarn and just avoid this whole emergency cast on thing I did. So I'm gonna quickly look up how to do that. Thanks to Eye Candy Yarn's tutorial on YouTube for creating a circular sock machine bonnet. I have just finished mine. Let me show you. All it is some waste yarn, the blue yarn. Then you cast on a different yarn and you knit 10 rows. Then you deliberately create gaps by moving every other stitch onto the needle beside it. And you kind of create like a yarn over situation. Then you knit another 10 rows and then you lift the row 1 from the bottom all the way up to the final row and you create kind of like a hung hem. Which won't unravel. Then you knit a bunch of rows to create some bulk to put weights inside, and then you switch back to the waste yarn. So I've just done that. I've just cut my waste yarn, and now I think, according to Candy, maybe we just take the weights out. Oh, I'm using a peridot as a weight, and my snow globe. I should get some proper weights. I think now I just wind it and it should all come off. I don't know how to get the knitting off. I'm sure there is a proper way to do this and I just don't know what it is. It's so ugly. So you see what I'm talking about? This is the emergency cast on down here. This is all the kind of original knitting I did. And then I created a double knit hem with a kind of picot style edge where there's every other stitch has been knit and every other stitch has been skipped. And so I think the idea for this is that you actually flip it upside down. You remove this waste yarn and these become your helpful little loops. And then you just cinch up the bottom or do whatever you want with it to hang some weights off. And I think you put this inside the machine every time to get started and it gives you those little loops instead of having to do that horrible web situation. A couple of hours later and I am finished with my very first sock machine project. This is my little cast on bonnet that I made. And I am so proud of myself. I feel like I understand a lot more about this machine now. Definitely, I have a lot to learn. Like, Without the expertise of mostly these ladies on YouTube explaining how this stuff works, I just don't think I could have figured it out. I am really excited for what this opens up in terms of gift knitting and just like experimenting with knitting a little bit more. Definitely the next thing I'm going to make is I'm going to use this to cast on, and I am going to knit myself a tube sock with my self-striping yarn and then figure out how to do an afterthought heel. So I'm really, really excited about that. I hope you enjoyed watching me experiment with my 3D printed circular sock knitting machine for the very first time. I hope I taught you a couple of things that maybe might make your life a bit easier if you also have printed one of these and are learning how to use it. Yeah, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. If you are experienced in using one of these machines, please, please, please let me know down below. Let me know what I could improve, things that make your life easier, projects that you like knitting, all that kind of stuff. And until next time, I'll see you all very soon, and happy knitting.